You need to have the right platform carrying all your valuable data.
The platform, you can compare it then to the engine. The data in that platform is more like the engine oil. Having a state-of-the-art technology driving your business forward is become as crucial as having the right RM. If they're not equipped with the right tool set, they will not have much to say. Clients are selecting their wealth managers primarily based on access. What deals, what opportunities can they get access to? That is becoming a key differentiating point. There's a need to have industrialized processes and automate processes. By doing that, you are reducing cost of service. We are still in the phase of incorporating AI in existing operating models, but the future, it will be a flip. AI will govern how that operating model looks. I don't think it's years down the road, it's just months. The human element of the operating model will have to be retrofitted wherever the AI is lacking.
Welcome to the Pulse Check podcast. I have Yash Shah with me, who I know since 14 years, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
I still remember when you joined us at Synpulse, that we were on the same project together back in Singapore, where I was still living in Singapore back then, now of course in Hong Kong, and you visit us this time. So thank you for joining me today. So you, of course, are well known in the market, driving private banking, platform change, core banking, the heavy lifting that most are scared of because it requires a lot of business domain knowledge, but also all the technical depth, the plumbing, as some would call it.
Yeah.
Before I go into all that depth, of course, you know me, I would love to hear more from you personally. What's something that you can share? What makes you you?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, thanks for the invite, Salomon. I'm very surprised that it took you so long to, convince me to get onto this podcast. But I'm very happy that, now it's getting so engaged that you're calling all the big shots onto the podcast. So again, I've known you for the last 13 years. I've been with Synpulse for the same amount of time. Again, it's been an amazing ride. My first international travel for a project also was to Hong Kong. This was also 13 years ago for a bank which we were working on. It was just over that go live weekend, and I would never forget that because it was both chaotic plus a very, very adventurous weekend at the same time, right? And that sort of got me hooked on to the private banking wealth management side of things. As you rightly said, I've been in this space for the last 13 years, working across most of APAC, Middle East, a bit of Australia as well. And more on the personal side, this is the first time I'm actually traveling to Hong Kong on, let's say, holidays, right? And it's for my son. He's 18 months old, and I've never been to Disneyland ever.
Wow.
Right? I'm not a big fan of these amusement parks, but I'm trying to change that side of myself and trying to get more into that. And that's why we are here on a holiday to bring him across 2 days on the weekend also to Disneyland.
And you will have an advantage over me because I've never been to Disneyland either. My son is about to get to 5 years old. While he has seen it, I have not. So please tell me then.
You can join us.
Yeah, exactly. No, so thank you once again for being with me here today. And of course, as many of our guests, they follow the podcast because of especially our depth in terms of private banking wealth management, but also in terms of technology and innovation.
Yeah.
I would love to start with maybe where some may think it's boring, basically the operating platform of the big private banks and wealth managers, the plumbing, as we said before. And many banks, they will go through that journey of replacing old core legacy systems with more modern art applications. And sometimes the business struggles also to see what is actually the value that is being created. It's of course necessary, everyone has to do that step, even more so when we later talk about AI, to have that ready because you need to have the right platform carrying all your valuable data. But I would love to start with your views on how to create from that core transformation then value for the business.
I think I'll go back to one of the other podcasts which you had, right? And we always referring to a wealth manager or a bank as like, let's say if you draw a parallel to a car, right? And then the platform, basically you can compare it then to the engine, right? And then if you take it a step even further, the data in that platform is more like the engine oil, right? So it's extremely important for both of these to work in tandem. And most of these core platform transformations, so let's say wealth management platform transformations, is a bit like you are driving the car, but you have to change the engine at the same time, right? And technology has gotten so advanced at this point in time that it basically is becoming an enabler rather than a back-end function, which is just supporting some basic necessities which a relationship manager or a wealth manager might need, right? So having a state-of-the-art technology driving your business forward is become as crucial as having the right RM or the right wealth manager talking to your client, right? Because yes, they are the face of the brand. They represent your organization, but if they're not equipped with the right tool set, they will not have much to say.
And as you have a global role here as partner at Synpulse, you carry the full core banking platform practice across all the different regions. Do you see some regional differences also in terms of how they manage that change and how value is pursued?
Yes, absolutely right. So here, and this basically came out as one of the key findings of a study which we did in 2020, so Q1 2024, because we wanted to see where do we bring our business, where do we play a role as Synpulse consultants in that whole global setup. And we found that there are, to a certain extent, three types of countries / locations or regions, and they have different needs because they're in different stages of maturity when it comes to their, let's say, the business. There are certain regions which let's say you have Singapore, you have Hong Kong, you have Switzerland. To a certain extent, you have the smaller European countries which are more wealth management, let's say, heavy. You have Liechtenstein, you have Luxembourg. They are way ahead in their maturity curve when it comes to providing advice, serving clients, serving high net worth individuals, right? And there, the need is of more standardization, more industrialization on the operating model, and more differentiation, almost like going to the segment of, let's say, the segment of one when it comes towards the end clients, right? So your RMs are focusing on each client as they are representing a full segment themselves. Whereas the back end, you have subscription for a fund. That's the same if you're doing for any kind of clients for any kind of amounts, right? So that's probably the first and the most mature segment. The second segment where we're seeing is certain, I would say, emerging markets where we have banks and wealth managers which are advanced when it comes to the RM knowledge, RM efficiency, but are lacking when it comes to a centralized operating model and a centralized platform, which basically providing that tool set to the relationship manager so that they can do their job in the right frame of reference. That's the second kind of wealth managers which we have. And third is basically where they are and I've seen this mostly in the frontier, let's say in the frontier markets, especially if I call out one here in Vietnam, right? They're very, very advanced when it comes to their technology, when it comes to the tooling which they have. But unfortunately, the knowledge from a wealth management perspective or the regulations which are needed from a let's say from an AI ML perspective, right, are not there, or they're not in place, or not there from a mature point of view. So these are the three different kinds of segmentation we can draw from the different markets and economies when it comes to wealth management, and the different ways of solving for each of these different markets.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. When we started our business here more than 15 years back in Asia, that it was all very traditional still. And of course, the big private banks moving on to those more sophisticated platforms. Now you have also, of course, retail and smaller tier 2, tier 3 banks, and also universal banks that cover, as you said, all the different segments. And last but not least, you have then also the family offices and external asset managers.
Yes.
So it becomes really an ecosystem.
Yes.
And I see, of course, there's been a huge catch-up of also sophistication. Hong Kong, as you are here now, has been known also in terms of sophistication when it comes to financial products. Of course, a big financial market also due to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And all that complexity needs to come together.
Yeah.
I would love to now come more into the value chain or the cycle of also when we engage with our clients. And again, they start maybe back to front, so they do the core modernization, but of course they want to do also full digital at the front, engaging with their clients. The expectations there are also rising. So it's for us in our business, you can almost call it like a flywheel, right? That we try to, of course, nurture and support our clients in partnership for long term. So maybe you can explain a bit what this wealth platform flywheel actually means and what we do there.
2 points there, right? I think first, I would just like to latch on to the first comment from your side, which was that the lines are blurring a bit between retail, wealth, private banking, family offices, right? So extremely important what you mentioned there. And I see, let's say, pure play private banks, universal banks, asset managers, sometimes even insurance firms, which are getting into the wealth management play, because it used to be a luxury, but now it's almost like a necessity, right? And with increase in per capita income, as you said, across these different markets, right? It will become a necessity going forward. It's not optionality anymore, right? And here I really think that two key things when it comes, and some of the wealth managers which will succeed will have to solve both these things in tandem. On the higher end of the value chain, right? Clients are selecting their wealth managers primarily based on access, right? What deals, what opportunities can they get access to if they go via that specific wealth manager, right? And that is becoming a key differentiating point for anyone who wants to operate in this wealth management space, right? Size is becoming secondary to a certain extent, right? And that is because of the second A, right? So next to access, there's also automation. Anything which is middle and back office heavy, as I mentioned earlier as well, right? There's no need to differentiate, right? There's need to automate to a certain extent, right? Or there's a need to have industrialized processes and automate processes as much as possible, right? So by doing that, you are reducing cost of service, right? Because over the last few years, what we've seen is the cost of acquisition of a client is basically getting higher because of the optionalities that they have. So to counter that and to balance that, the cost of servicing of each individual client, that needs to go down tremendously, right? And here, again, I would just like to call out two of our existing clients as well, who I believe have perfectly solved this sort of the wealth continuum problem, if I may, and have managed to democratize even their private banking products towards the mass affluent segment. Here, I would really call out HSBC as one, and the second one then would be DBS. And they have the scale, and they have managed to provide both access with the right level of automation across all these segments, right? And again, drawing back to the first point which I mentioned, was they've been able to do because of a foolproof operating model which they have to a certain extent, which is centralized. And second is having a single platform powering that change more globally. Sorry, I took a bit long on that, but
yeah, no worries.
I just thought it's super important because that is a problem which will have to be solved by a lot of the wealth managers who want to achieve a certain level of scale in this space. To your other point on having accelerators, or having a bit of a flywheel concept, what we realized over the last few years, when I say few, is actually the last 10, 15 years of doing transformations, doing projects, right, is there is value in repeatability. So there are a lot of things which are very similar, which happens in every single transformation. You have to do data migration. You have to do performance calculations. Again, I'm sure you've done enough projects to actually understand that, right? So what we are trying to do for the last 18 months, we basically started a project internally in Synpulse. And the concept we use is basically the flywheel concept, right? For most people who know flywheel, they know it's not a wheel, but it basically is works on the preservation of kinetic energy principle. So one part of the flywheel accelerates the other part. And here, what we have done is we are trying to merge different components here into that flywheel, starting with the right operating model. Because if you have the architecture of a house fully planned out and the blueprint ready, there's very small chance that you'll make a mistake when you're actually building the house, right? The second is, let's say, if I compare it again with the same example, right, laying of bricks. It's a very monotonous task, and there are a lot of things which you can do to automate that task, right? So we've built a set of accelerators for exactly the same processes or steps which I mentioned earlier to increase efficiency, but rather than increasing efficiency, reduce human errors in that. Plus, what we're doing also is utilizing certain software, certain accelerators, which are not just for our end clients, but are also being utilized by our in-house consultants, in-house engineers, to exactly ensure the same mistakes are not being repeated again. And that's how we achieve this flywheel concept, where one project leads to certain accelerators being created, which is then helping other projects. And eventually the transformation not just happens faster, but it's much smoother.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, because reducing errors reduces risks. I think many banks are scared of these big transformations because they don't want to go through an 18, 24 months of painful exercise. And we all know that if the engine, as you said, of a car, if that's failing, then really the car doesn't go anywhere anymore. And it's the same with the bank. Speaking of also efficiency, innovation, and so on, I would love to also look forward into the future. I mean, not so much into the future because it's also already a reality. Of course, everyone speaks about AI, and some think that, hey, we can actually now just forget about the core platforms and just do only AI. Not as simple, of course, and would love to talk about this. So wealth platforms in the age of AI, and also in terms of scale, how do you see that today? And then, of course, also in the future.
Very interesting question, right? And here, the approach which we are taking with our global teams is we are trying to educate ourselves first, right? Because we, as you rightly said, everyone talks about AI, right? But there's so much going on, and the rate of change, of progress that's happening in this space is so fast that your knowledge becomes a bit outdated, not in weeks, but also then in days, right? So what we're doing is we are establishing protocols, processes, systems in-house, and educating our in-house consultants first, right? So we have taken a two-step approach here. First, and again, I like to have these sort of structures in place, right? So the first phase, we are calling it, is basically empower. So we are utilizing a lot of these large language processing models. We are utilizing these artificial intelligence tools to ensure that some of the repetitive tasks which our guys are doing in-house, writing solution documents, creating architecture designs, looking up for references on other projects which have been done in the past to find a similar solution which the client would want, right? All of this is getting much, much simpler, right? So as you might know, with the help of Synpulse 8 and our engineers on that side, and of course Kate, all this accessing information and accessing references and creating repeatedly needed documentation is already solved. So most of our consultants have access to these tools, and that simplifies how they conduct work on these projects. The next step, and that's the other phase which we want to call it as elevate, is how do you not just utilize AI and these tools for your in-house solutions, but also can educate your end clients and incorporate these tool sets into the existing processes, right? And I think that is the second phase. Finally, as you rightly pointed out, right, we are still in the phase of incorporating AI in existing operating models and existing processes. But the future, it will be a flip where AI will govern how that operating model looks like. And then the human, as we call it, the human in the loop, that the human element of that process of the operating model will have to be retrofitted into wherever the AI is then lacking. So that will flip, and that flip I don't think is it's years down the road, but it's just months. And having said this, as you rightly know, we have a core team which is working on a bank in the box approach, which we have, but fully solved via agents, right? So an agentic AI powered bank in a box. And I think that is going with the future of wealth management. One point which a lot of people think is systems won't be needed anymore, right? But I personally believe that a lot of these wealth platforms, what they have solved and they've solved almost to perfection, is the source of truth is extremely well maintained in these platforms, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the business logic, a lot of the human intelligence will be extracted from these platforms, but they will eventually become a source of truth, which will be referenced on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, exactly. So this system of records, which is still the engine, maybe you talk differently to the engine. You don't go through a fat client on your desktop anymore, but through, as you said, Kate. So Kate, K8 with, of course, coming from Synpulse 8, Pulse 8, is the agent for us for everything. Be it if you would be a relationship manager at the bank, using it as your RM assistant, or being a developer on one of these core banking projects, using it as your coding assistant.
Yes.
Or also just to retrieve information from our knowledge base. I think that also brings us to the next point. So if we increase with these agents much more efficiency, of course we reduce, again, the costs, the risks, as we said before. Now, do you think it's possible in not so far foreseeable future to do one of these core banking transformations instead of 18 months or 12 months and maybe 3 months?
That's a very triggering question. But I think it's an important discussion to have, right? I think the question will be, with such a fast rate of change, how do you time box a transformation, right? I think the future is having minor enhancements on an ongoing basis. So it will not be, again, I go back to my initial sort of metaphor, it will not be taking the full engine out and replacing it with another engine on an ongoing basis, and we say, hey, this takes 18 months, right? But it will be slowly changing bits and pieces of that engine that the end user doesn't even experience that there's a change happening in the background, but the elapsed time potentially could be the same, but that whole transformation will be much, much smoother, right? So there's no way to time box it saying, hey, this is going to take 18 months, it's going to take 3 months. And I strongly believe that moving business logic or business intelligence into these smaller, potentially even microservices, right? Out of a core heavy, or let's say a wealth management platform, is something which can be done in an extremely fast-paced environment, right? And most of the friction which we see is because of the people element in any transformation, right? It's usually not the systems who are complaining. So I really believe that eventually we will be pricing projects. We are already doing that, but pricing projects much, much more aggressively based on outcome, but also how frictionless it is to the existing operations and the business which an organization is basically doing.
Yeah, and you brought a good last point in terms of people. It's still a people business. The biggest change is always really the change for the people that will still, of course, interact, even if it's through Kate instead of the fat client. So that's going to be important. That's why we also still hire colleagues. We still bring talents on board. We need them.
Yeah.
Of course, you need to be technically skilled and versatile and really use AI also to be efficient, but definitely still a growing business. With this, any last elements, something we didn't discuss that you would love to share?
I think I just want to ask you, because you've been, again, working on a lot of these internal toolings, tool sets, and as I just mentioned earlier also, the rate of change of development in this space is so fast, right? How do we as a firm ensure that we are always at the forefront of it, right? And not just developing products, but also enabling our consultants to, adopt those products in their day-to-day project lives?
Good question, putting me on the spot. I think it's very important. Leadership is, you have to drive and push yourself from the very beginning. It's walk the walk, walk the talk, in a sense of, if I don't experience it myself, of course I can't really push my team.
Yes.
You know me, I've also spent weekends on trying all the newest capabilities with AI, using Claude, using Anthropic and OpenAI and all the different solutions, and really having optimized my own life heavily in that regard, but also really solving some of the problems we've seen with our clients. And I think this is very important. It starts with us, goes to the team. Same also with the clients. If I can show them myself and not through another salesperson, it's much more convincing. Having a lot of these capabilities available at your fingertips on your mobile phone, rather than bringing a big screen presentation, is also much more convincing. Because in the end, as you said before, it all starts with people, and we have to lead for our team, and that's why I embrace it, and I also love it. I really look forward also to the coming few years. I'm not scared that our jobs are going away. I think I'm very happy that I don't need to do the mundane administrative tasks anymore, that this is being taken care of.
Yep.
But the rest, spending time with the team, with people, that still remains and will remain long term.
I think, as you rightly said, right, I think for me, the whole concept of relationships, that will be even more magnified. It will be even more important.
Yes.
And that's the only thing which will help in the future differentiate, let's say, relationships between human versus how we interact with some of these agents and, people, let's say people/agents, which are then doing the tasks, right? So it is bringing back the human element, which, as some people say, who have been around a little bit longer than me, was a bit lost in the sort of last few decades.
Absolutely. With this, thank you so much, Yash, joining me today for the Pulse Check podcast. Of course, we can find you on LinkedIn and also on social media, same as with Pulse Check podcast. Of course, on social media, YouTube, please follow us. And if you have any feedback, please share with us. And one more time, thank you, Yash.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you in Disneyland on Friday.
Exactly.
Thank you.